first time I did a presentation was in 2001 at a festival called OFF. And I'd never done a presentation before. I was equally nervous. And I thought it would be a really good idea to just like copy all my shit from my hard drive to my laptop and don't prepare any slides and just start going through all of my folders to show off all of the projects. So, on the contrary, I did name my folders properly this time. So it's not everything is just called stuff or final or really final or just like, you know, fuck this project. I did kind of get in trouble when I was making the slides because they needed to be in the right order. And so I changed my mind quite a lot on the order of them. So you see like O2, C, 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 C. So it could come in front of 3. Anyway, let me just get started. I'm also using Windows 7, so. All right. So, hello, my name is Joost, like toast. So, that's my daughter, by the way. Like toast, not juiced, as a lot of people say in America. I'm a visual designer and art director. I work on augmented reality at Google. I'll only touch on this briefly because I'll be showing more of the stuff that kind of got me into Google. Here are some random facts. So this kind of shows you how old I am. Live in San Jose right now. All right. Thank you. So when I was in school, I did graphic design and industrial design, but I only went to graphic design school because I wanted to be a comic book artist. I didn't really care about doing graphics, but because they taught traditional drawing at this school, so they taught traditional drawing at this school. That's why I went. But I got in touch with graphic design, and most of it I found quite boring. But a teacher noticed that I wanted to do something else, and he introduced me to basically 2 really big examples for me, which was the Designers Republic and Tomato. And Tomato is a really cool design agency, kind of like a collaborative effort of different creative people that did really experimental work. So some other inspirations to see here is Wipeout. Actually, the cover of this game was designed by the Designers Republic. Then what you see here is designed by Tomato, so it's Underworld. Anybody familiar with Underworld? Anybody seen Trainspotting? A few more hands. Anybody know the song Born Slippy? All right, well, that's Underworld for you. The Attic was another big inspiration for me. They put out these books called Noise, and they just have like random graphic stuff in them. Another huge part of inspiration for me are these 3D abstracts, and those really got me into the next bunch of slides. Oh, and cats. So I'm a really cat people. Wow, there's so many more dog lovers in this room. All right. I just wanted to ask this question, like, who likes the image more or less? Let's say more, this image. Like, who likes this image the best? All right. Who likes this image the best? Oh, that's a lot more people. Shit. All right. Well, thank God, right? It's not really it wasn't really part of the competition, like, you know, that this is better than this. It's just that when I started, I was really inspired by tons of detail and doing like these crazy 3D abstract kind of things. And it's not that that's bad, but over the course of time, I just got more interested by abstraction and looking at other parts of the visual language that inspired me to work on. It's just, you hear a lot at this conference, like kind of finding your voice or your specific style or anything like that. I think what it means for me was that, like looking back at my inspirations, if you look at this image, and then if you look at like the first stuff that I used to work on, it's very much inspired by that, almost like, you know, you could call it copycatting. And at some point, you'll want to kind of try different things and be inspired by, it's like, at the moment, technical illustrations at Google, at Facebook, they all kind of look the same. So if you had to do an illustration for a tech company and you search like, oh, tech illustration, and you get a certain style, and you copy that, well, you're not really pushing the boundaries. You're just like following what the box is, right? So I'm just going to click through a couple of these. This is also old stuff, but you kind of see the style kind of move into a different direction. This is a collaboration with Matt Pike from Universal Everything. Universal Everything grew out of the Designers Republic, kind of splitting up into different groups. So it was a really nice opportunity for me to work with one of my heroes. Fairly old stuff, going more organic and colorful, trying to go really deep into fluid animation and stuff like that. So let me first break here. And this is my last show reel. Well, the audio definitely works. All right, so I hate doing show reels, and so that's why my last one was from 2009. And I worked as a freelancer till 2016, but I was just like, I hate doing show reels. So let me show you this reel. Anybody wants to see more old stuff or to go to the new stuff? New, okay, well. I'll show you one more old thing. Which one? I'll show you the Killzone one. So really quickly about this one, they gave me carte blanche, they gave me all of their 3D assets, and were like, well, you want to create this like end credits animation. But really, what they came to me initially was to design their interface. And I really didn't care so much about designing their interface. I really wanted to do the end credits. But this is what got me paid. And then the other stuff is what I really enjoy. But it will tie into some of the stuff that I do at Google. This was the Killzone concept. So basically, what this shows is a prototype of how the UI would work. At the time, like the 6-DoF controller was a new thing. You could wiggle it around. So the idea was that sand particles would catch behind the panels, and you could shake it off with your controller. So that's why it's moving around like that. Okay. Let me move on for the sake of time. So yeah, new stuff. Getting cleaner and cleaner. Let me just go through this and talk about the kind of things that motivate me to work on these. So I have a real interest in light and reflection, and in color. So you're like a designer, right? But a lot of, or what we heard over the course, like, and that's kind of hard to explain, but I can go really deep in just the shape or the color, and maybe kind of not so deep into the narrative. And it was great to see so many presenters here that are like super strong storytellers. But I get much more lost in the aesthetics of it and go really deep on shape, like how does refraction work, or reflection, or like in this case, I was asked to put letters into, like weave it together and make a patterns out of it. So it's like kind of my OCD, I guess, which leads me to this project that I did for Mini. Super basic concept. The new car had 5 doors. So they reached out to a bunch of different artists, and they asked to do an animation that would count to 5 to celebrate that Mini now has 5 doors. So I'm a big car guy, by the way. I really like cars. So I knew a little bit about the heritage, and what interested me was like the sports division where they use these stripings. So in the previous presentation, you saw the stripings on the Porsche. It's like a really cool design. So this is their color palette. You kind of know what the car is made of. So you have the car paint and carbon fiber and chrome and stuff like that. So the simple spline generator is something that I saw, and I was like, well, that's going to be a cool way to try and figure out what these individual numbers would look like. Because looking at this image, basically I wanted everything to feel as though it's in motion. Kind of a cliche, but as cars travel, obviously they create trails. So what if all of these trails would animate from one number to the next and count to 5 that way? To see how this was made, because that's why I'm at this table. Okay. So first thing that I did was, oh, thank God, it's back. This is the number 4, super abstracted. I just used a basic font, then only created the inline of it and smoothed it. So what this generator does, it's just going to randomly offset different lines from this spline. So when I hit generate, you kind of see this happen, right? So I went through a bunch of different iterations. You can kind of mess around with all these settings until I was happy with that. You're also going to see very weird file naming because I didn't rename all my 3D project files. So this one was called 5 on it. So what this shows you is the actual geometry that's animating across splines. So as I drag through this, you see all of these guys moving out. And they'll move upwards. This is where my camera is at. And then they'll move back down again. So I still have a work in progress animation here. One. All right, work with me here. So basically, what you see happen here are that once I had all of these numbers created, I needed to think about a way that the lines would travel from one number to the next. So I had the basic splines, and I created a particle system that would travel across these splines, and as they travel, they create trails. And I would then use those trails to put these ribbons on that would animate across the screen. And what that looks like is this. And if it looks a little bit complex, it's because it is. I had like a few hundred lines to work off. And let me see, from the camera view, it looked like this, right? And if you're a little bit OCD like me, and all of these lines are going to fly towards you, I really, really, really wanted to prevent any of the lines from intersecting each other, right? So if you look at this, like this image here, I would basically move in and start moving all of these lines individually from each other, that once they animate, that they wouldn't hit each other. It's like kind of a useless point, but that's what made this animation. Another project that I would like to really share is for Iris van Herpen. Anybody familiar with her work? A few people, great. So she is this amazing artist that creates these like haute couture dresses, and they're almost like walking sculptures. She's famous for the work she's done with Björk, and so that's basically like her background. She did one thing for Björk, and now she keeps building on it. I think Lady Gaga used this recently. The inspiration was quite straightforward. Like, how can you not be inspired by these forms, right? And I was asked to create a teaser, just a teaser animation for her new line called Voltage. So these are some early concepts. Initially, we were thinking to have them like in these Renaissance kind of environments, 3D animated sculptures that would live there, animate, and that would be the whole thing. We ended up going a little bit more simplified, because these at the time would render about an hour per frame, and we didn't have the time to finish that, or the budget to render it elsewhere. See the file naming here, new plan, new plan, new plan, one new. No worries, no worries. It's all good. It's all good. Yes. So this is the shape. It's really straightforward. Like, this is exactly what you just saw, right? That's the whole scene. And if you look at this shape, these are the modifiers that I applied to it. So it's just a bunch of cylinders. I put some noise on it, which makes it wiggle. I twist it, I bend it. Then on the splines, by themselves, they're just like vectors with no thickness. So I put a renderable spline on them, which give them the dimensions that you just saw. And this basically uses a smoothing, which makes them, when you get close to them, you won't see the facets. So that's how that animates. Quickly move on, though, for time. Another fashion designer called Maya Hansen. Anybody know her? No, she's not very famous. Would have been great though. It's, yeah, fucking know we're gonna go. Thanks again. I'm not going to open up this project file because it's very closely related to this technique. So who wants to see this project file? Nobody, all right, so let's move on. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Stop being an asshole. So one thing that I also like are physics. Crazy physics simulations. In this case, it was pretty obvious, like this is hopefully still loading. But the way that things break and crumble, and if you apply forces to them to see how they behave, and to kind of play around with that. So you could have just your basic type of physics where something crumbles to the ground, like if you blow up a building or something. But I like the idea of using reverse gravity and to kind of see what happens. So in this case, I also have a particle system. I turned it off for the sake of this computer. What it does is that when you saw the animation, you kind of get this like smaller fractions of dust. And what this particle system does is that based on the momentum these particles have, I'm setting a parameter that says like if you travel this amount of distance to then spawn yourself at a very small size and at a very high quantity. But if I start to scrub through this, you can see all of these elements animate. All of these keyframes are basically the result of the simulation. And you see it jumping here because I'm really not a big fan of editing. So I actually just changed the camera around in my 3D program. I really do not recommend this at all, because if they ask you to change the timing a little bit, then you couldn't. But again, like certain projects have certain budgets, so this is what they got. All right. This is personal, one of my favorite projects, working with the late Zaha Hadid, making this building in Dubai called the Opus. And what's really unique about this building is the extremely organic form. at some point in Dubai, it was not necessarily about how high you would go, but more like what kind of super interesting shape you can create. And I was working with an agency called Staat out of Amsterdam, who created this, this identity, and they wanted to animate it in some way. But they were very strict about that they didn't want like this exact shape of the building to be the transition to this logo. So what I proposed was that, because it's such an organic form, is to think about, well, what if, and it's kind of like cutting out of the shape, right? So it's like a Boolean applied to a cube. So what if we were to design this form, which is the negative space of the building, and it would constantly morph, and then the end result would morph into the identity itself. So they liked that idea, and they basically just gave me freedom to execute it. I don't have the source files with me of this one, but imagine, again, like working with fluids. It's a particle emitter that you apply certain forces to, like wind. So if you shoot a lot of particles with turbulence into the air, they start to become whimsical. So at the bottom of here would be an emitter kind of shooting off. And then based on the boundaries of this building, I would slice off the sides, so it represents the restrictions of the building dimensions. Not going too far into this one because it's such a long project, but for me to work with Tomato, who were my biggest inspiration, it's just something really special for me. So it's sound reactive animation. You can like check it out on my Vimeo. This one was for Nike. These are a whole bunch of frames from that. I see I'm very short on time. That's kind of unfortunate, but inspiration from Bauhaus. I'll just show the animation real quick. I was asked to collaborate with a choreographer and with a whole bunch of dancers, obviously. And they had a big screen behind them, and the idea was that based on their movements, that I would create this animation. Again, it was basically do whatever you want. So this was the live performance. I will show you the actual one, but you can kind of imagine, like, or you don't have to imagine, this is the show. This is what it looked like. But what I'll show you now is what I worked on to composite the choreography to the animation. So we shot this just at a gym. I made like a super dirty green screen to separate the background so that I could have my animation fit to it. This is me turning the volume down. It doesn't need to go up because it's like really, really shitty music. So these were the concepts I presented, really inspired by Bauhaus. Move this, animate like that. And they were all just like, yeah, great, 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 fine. I'll show you this real quick. So I decided that the girl that does the popping to like completely retrack all of the movements she made. And what this does is this is actually steering the animation that you saw there. How much time do I have? I'm okay? I didn't even get to the Google part yet, so. At some point, I started working on AR. This was also really random, like the guy that I worked with from Tomato, he went to work with Sony, and he reached out to me like, hey, can you 3D model an alien ship and another alien ship for this AR thing we're working on? Sure. So this is what I made for them. And it was the first time that I needed to start to think about assets that could actually be used in a real-time environment. So they were not very happy when they saw this design. That would like totally not work in real time. But we got it to work. I can't show you anything of this yet. But it led me to Google. So he left Sony and he went to Google. And he said, well, we're working on this AR thing now at Google. Would you be interested in joining? And for me, my freelance career was kind of taking a dive. I was getting tired of, like working basically like all the time. And I thought I would either join an agency and do like art or creative direction. And then this request came along. So I went to Mountain View. They flew me out there, and you have to kind of go through this interview process, which is super awkward. And then one of the designers there asked me this question. So can you give me an example of good and bad visual design? And I couldn't answer the question because I was considered for the role of visual designer, but I had no idea what visual design really was. I thought I was going to there to do some like crazy AR 3D stuff, but that wasn't the case. So in my work now, I try to basically use the environment, obviously, and things you can augment into it. So it's either the augmentation of using three-dimensional space, what can you put into it, and what can you get out of it. So some like of the projects that I got to work on are expeditions. So this was an AR initiatives for children where they could place all sorts of objects in their environment and kind of learn by checking them out in like full 6 degrees of freedom. Also a little bit more on the entertainment side, we worked with Childish Gambino, and you could place him in your environment, and these are a whole bunch of different other characters. And another big one that I get to work on is Google Lens. So what Google Lens allows you to do, you can look at anything in the world. Hopefully it will give you back the information of what you're looking for. Let me just show you a really quick clip of that. These are just clips that you can also see on. Let me show you this one first. This was one of the first things I got to work on. Is just basic object placement. So what that meant for me, I'm just kind of jumping all over the place right now. What that means for me is that when I joined Google and they were thinking about AR, they had no visual affordance on what it would look like for you to work with the technology, to detect the surface, and to be able to place an object. Like all of those UX challenges needed to be visualized. So, and that's why they asked for my expertise basically in 3D, because of compositing and thinking spatially, it also allows you to come up with this spatial UI. This was a very first kind of prototype. You have this awkward hand motion. You need to create parallax with your phone in order for the technology to understand that something is a surface. So how do you tell people how to do that? And then once the surface is found, how do you visualize that? And then thinking about, well, you can drag this object into the space, and how does the space respond? Then once you place it, you get this kind of inertia, and this was just me animating it together. It had nothing to do with the product. So what would that look like actually in the product today? So this is real time. It's basically using my visual example that the engineers would then be able to create shaders out of. And what you see happen here is the thought process that I can quickly bring up here. Like thinking about parametrics and fall off. Like if you go toward the edge, everything kind of becomes smaller. As you start to interact with it, the shapes respond differently. And here, I'm thinking more about like system level design. It's so much different from my other stuff, right? But I find it really interesting and really rewarding to work on it, especially when you see how the kind of feedback that you get.
All right, who wants to see a volcano? 3, 2, 1. Wow! Look at that lava, look at that smoke coming out of that.
Pretend you're an airplane and fly over the tornado.
That's the top of it.
What do you see?
It's either asteroid, meteorite.
We're learning about DNA and genes, things that we can't see. And so the most exciting thing for me with the AR technology was that I could see kids get an aha moment that I couldn't get by just telling them about it.
The minute I saw it pop up on the screen, it made me want to get up and walk to it.
We actually get to turn around and look at things from all angles, so it gave us a nice perspective.
See if you can figure out what that might be based on what you know about the respiratory system.
I got to see where the alveoli branched off, and I could look inside them and see how everything worked, which I never saw before, and it was really, really cool.
Show you one more really quickly, which is Google Lens. Google Lens also had a big impact in India for people that, like all of the different languages you have here and the different scripts and people that have a hard time reading. Let me just roll it.
मेरा नाम उर्मिला है, ईपी की रहने वाली हूँ। मेरे 3 बच्चे हैंगे, स्कूल में जाते हैं और बच्चों को होमवर्क नहीं करा सकते हैं, लेकिन चलो मेरे बच्चे होशियार हो गए। थोड़ा सा नेक पढ़ लिख जाते, कोई भी पढ़ा लिखा का काम भाव वो नहीं कर सकते हैं। बार बार कहने पड़ती है उन लोगों के कि मतलब थोड़ा सा बता दिए। मुझे पहली बार जैसे बच्चों को मतलब बार बार कविता नहीं आ रही थी, मतलब फोटो लाई।
1 कप सोयाबीन बहियों में 4 कप पानी डालकर उबालें।
तो इसने पढ़ के सुनाया है, और जैसे मतलब रिपोर्ट कार्ड आओ बच्चों को।
अंग्रेजी, हिंदी, गणित, विज्ञान,
तो मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा कि मतलब वो चीज़ जा चीज़ है, मतलब जा चीज़ है। अब तो मैं खुद के लिए बहुत कुछ काम कर लेंगे।
चालू खाता, बचत खाता।
अब जैसे रेलवे के टिकट कटाना है तो मैं कटा सकती हूँ, किसी के सहारा नहीं लेने पड़ता है। एक तो इसमें बहुत बेहतर है।
Yeah, so this is, I guess, kind of I find my contrary at Google, where I was always kind of thinking about like style and graphics and stuff like that. And at Google, I really have an opportunity to like reach these people and make my design really have an impact beyond just purely aesthetics. Do I have time for this? No, no time for this. All right, I'm just going to show it real quick. This was the result of a collaboration with my daughter. So she was making these drawings, and I was making materials out of them. So, and then I put it on a card. Thank you.